Hello, everyone. Welcome to another edition of the Miss Texas Show with your co-host, Melissa Santana. Excited as always to bring you another edition of the show, but also another wonderful guest. And today's guest is none other than Tara Alston. Tara is not only a survivor of trauma, which she experienced both as a child and as an adult, but she's also the founder and owner of Yet Still I Stand. She is going to talk to us about her triumph over trauma, as well as how she came to, own and found this wonderful organization, all the great work she has done, some more of her journey, and just the lives that she's impacted. And so I'm excited to learn more about Tara. Hope you are too, and excited for you to tune in.
The TheMsTexasShow is a voice of hope for victims, survivors, advocates, and community leaders against gender-based violence to share their stories and resources. We began showcasing life in Texas. Today, we are impacting lives not only in Texas, but also around the world. Under our segment, Military Time, we run this segment in partnership with the National Veterans Chamber of Commerce. We invite military and veterans who have overcome traumatic events to share their experiences during and after their military service. Under our beauty segment, we invite fellow pageant winners and contestants, artists, musicians, actors, models, and dancers, and last but not least, our survivor leaders from family violence, sex trafficking, sexual assault, stalking, and other traumatic events, who are ambassadors for these causes to share their lives and the impact they have made. To become a guest on our show, email us at msusatexas@gmail.com. If you would like to support victims and survivors of gender-based violence, make a tax-deductible donation to Hope Picks Global at www.hopepyxglobal.org.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another edition of the Miss Texas Show with your co-host, Melissa Santana. Excited as always to not only bring you another edition of the show, but also another wonderful guest. And today we have, and actually correct me if I'm wrong, but Tara Alston, is that how we say it?
Alston, yes.
Alston. See, look, I had to make sure, y'all. See, I still be messing up sometimes. But yes, it's happy to have you. And not only is Tara a survivor of trauma, experienced both as a child and as an adult, but she has also been on her healing journey and has been given the opportunity to grow and thrive. One of her greatest desires is for others who have experienced challenges, hardships, and/or traumas to have that opportunity as well. She has obtained degrees in social psychology and human resource management and uses her knowledge and experience to serve youth and adults who have faced difficult circumstances in life. As the founder and owner of Yet Still I Stand, Tara shares her personal story at local and international events to empower and uplift others while providing resources to those who may be suffering in silence. She also provides one-on-one coaching and consulting, group workshops, and formal training on trauma-related issues, as well as subjects pertaining to healing, growth, and resilience. She is grateful for the opportunity to walk with those who are in every stage of their journey of triumph over trauma. And so with that, we are super excited to have you on the show. We appreciate you taking the time to be with us today. And so Tara, if you do not mind, I would love to give viewers the opportunity to get to know you. Who are you? A little bit about your journey. What led you here today?
All right. Thank you very much for having me. I appreciate it. I've been looking forward to it. So as you mentioned, I am the founder and owner of Yet Still I Stand, LLC. I'm also a wife and a mother. I birthed 3 boys. And then when I married my husband, he had already had 3 girls. So we have 6 between the 2 of us. And then I have a few that I love like my own that I did not birth. So we have a big family. And I work a daytime job for the state of Ohio. One of my roles in the daytime position is the anti-trafficking program administrator. So I do a lot of anti-trafficking efforts for our agency. And then I am the author of Yet Still I Stand, which just was recently published. So I'm excited about that. And it is a story about my life. And then also, I wrote it in an effort, just like when I do the speaking engagements, sharing my story in an effort to try to encourage others who may be experiencing different hardships or challenges or even abuse or trauma, but many of us have experienced things such as that, but if you have not, you probably know somebody who has. So I try to ensure that there's tools and resources available that can help all of the above. So that's really my main goal. My story does include things such as abuse and trauma, and something else that I like to state when I am sharing the big story is the fact, or the big picture of the story is the fact that it also includes the healing and growth and resiliency. So it's not just a story of hardship and sadness and challenges. It's one that I hope provides hope to others. And my story really began when I was a child at the age of 5. My biological father was not really an active part of my life. So throughout my childhood, I often felt like I was abandoned by him. And, for many of us, that leaves kind of a hole in your heart. You long for that type of love and wonder what it was about you that caused them possibly not to want to be involved, even though, as you go through the healing journey, you are able to see that it wasn't about you. It was different things that they were facing. But my mother remarried when I was young, and I had a stepfather beginning at the age of 5, and he adopted me, but I still refer to him in my story as my stepfather because I never felt like he was my father. And it just helps keep the two distinguished. So when I reference him, I'll still be referencing him as my stepfather. But I had experienced sexual abuse, emotional abuse, and physical abuse throughout my childhood at the hands of my stepfather. And the sexual abuse began when I was 5. And so I endured that from the time I was 5 until I was 17. The emotional abuse also occurred all throughout that time period. As you can imagine, when you're experiencing something such as the sexual abuse, the emotional abuse is not uncommon to be happening at the same time. So there was a lot of yelling and, telling me I was never going to amount to anything, and really nothing that I ever did seemed like it was right. Nothing I ever said seemed like it was right. So just experiencing all of those different types of things as well. And then there was physical abuse, as I mentioned, where, there were times where marks would be left. I remember one specific time when I was a child that I was in my sleeping bag, and he kicked me down the hallway in my sleeping bag until I urinated on myself, as just a small child. And so there were different times when I experienced the physical abuse that was a lot as well. And he just was really somebody who didn't want you to be happy. It seemed like he was one of those people that if you showed any type of excitement or happiness about something, he was going to ensure that he tried to ruin that. So I had a lot of things that I was battling throughout my childhood then, that again is not uncommon when you're experiencing things such as that. I did not have high self-esteem. As a matter of fact, I was somebody that did not want anybody to call on me in school. Don't ask me any questions. I was even so paranoid about having to talk in front of people or stand up in front of people that to go sharpen my pencil was a big ordeal. If I had to stand up in front of the class and walk to the pencil sharpener, you just don't want anybody to look at you. And so I experienced a lot of that. And then I left when I was 17, and you would think at that point, you're going to be super excited because you're getting out of this abusive situation, and hopefully the sky's the limit with the good things that are going to happen now. But again, like so many others who have experienced abuse as a child, you often go on to experience abuse as adults. And that was definitely my story. At 17, I left my home to find freedom from that abuse and ended up walking right into another abusive situation. And I had met my first husband, actually the man that became my first husband, right before I left my home, but didn't see him again until later in my 17th year. And that's when we started dating. And he was 5 years older than me at the time. And so he was an adult and he was a police officer and going to college. And, by a kid's mind, it looked like he had a lot going for him, the stuff that he was doing. But he wasn't really overly nice to me from the beginning. But, as the saying goes, I was looking for love in all the wrong places. So trying to fill those voids that were there with anybody who showed me attention and the potential of love. And so I ended up pregnant very quickly into that relationship. And that's really when the physical abuse began. He wanted to get married right away, and I was scared. I was 17, pregnant, young. I was trying to finish my schooling, work a full-time job, and had my own apartment at 17. So there was a lot going on in my life. And, I also at that time then began evaluating a little more as far as how he was treating me and talking to me. And it made me nervous just thinking about, do I want to walk into a marriage right away with this type of situation? So I had mentioned that it may be a good idea for us to get to know each other more, work through some things, because like I said, this was early on in our relationship, and that really upset him. And so he picked me up and threw me against the wall and told me he wanted to punch me and kick me in the stomach as hard as he could, which concerned me because, physical abuse and emotional abuse wasn't new to me. But what was very new to me was the fact that I had a life inside of me to protect. And so that really caught my attention. The abuse continued and actually got worse as the pregnancy continued. And it was scary. It was a very scary situation. But he began to tell me that he was going to kill me and take my baby if I did not marry him. And so that was concerning just because I knew that he was already physically abusive and just didn't know how far he would go. You'd like to think that somebody wouldn't go that far. I did end up having my son, and he gave me a purpose that I just had never felt before. I was so excited. He saved my life in more ways than one. Just having that purpose and that little human to take care of and make sure that he was protected. And so it was right after I had him that I experienced rape at gunpoint by my he would have been my fiance at that point. So he decided that it was not okay, that I needed time to heal. And so he took matters into his own hands and put a gun in my mouth and raped me. And that wasn't the first time that I had experienced rape by him, but it was the first time at gunpoint and with a baby in the next room. And so it was scary. Needless to say, when you are worried that you are not going to make it out of that situation alive, and being worried about your child, that is one of the scariest positions that you can be in. I did make it, and obviously I'm here. And, my son, I was able to keep him protected, but he was continuing to threaten me as far as killing me and taking my baby if I didn't marry him. And abusers oftentimes will use different tools to try to make you feel like something that is occurring is your fault. So, if I would just do this, he wouldn't have such strong emotions. If I would just marry him, he wouldn't be so upset that his baby was born out of wedlock and he wanted him to be born in wedlock. And so I needed to fix that situation and he would be happy. And just all the little things where, especially if you grew up in abuse, you're constantly thinking, well, maybe if I do this, it will be better. So I had the fear of him following through with his threats, and then the hope of, if I just do this, maybe it will be better, because that was what was constantly being stated and what I was constantly hearing. So I did marry him. It doesn't get better. when you give in to what it is that they're demanding at the time, because then they just go forward with demanding other things and trying to make you feel bad for that too. And so my oldest son was 3 months old when I got pregnant with my second son. And then you're really thinking about the fact of, they already oftentimes try to make it very difficult to leave when you're in a situation such as that. And financial abuse is a real thing that I don't think that people talk about enough. And this is where, he controlled every aspect of our finances, all the way down to if I was working and making money, that was money that he controlled. His money he controlled. If somebody sent me birthday money, he controlled that. I was not even permitted to go to the grocery store by myself, because there was one time that I went to the grocery store and purchased a bag of cookies that was not on the grocery list. And therefore, I lost that privilege of going to the grocery store and having access to even grocery money. And so having a second child made that even more concerning, because you're trying to figure out, how am I going to protect them and hopefully potentially leave this situation with no resources. And I would leave, and oftentimes he would track us down, find us, and then make threats to me about what he was going to do to the people that would help me. And so then you carry that guilt of, like, if anything happens to somebody else because they're helping us, I couldn't live with that. And so that was another way to try to keep you trapped, was to ensure that, he knew how much I care about other people. And so he wanted to make sure that I knew that there was concern about their safety if I continue to reach out to people for help as well. But then he hurt my children. And I don't know if there are any mama bears watching, but that is when everything changed for me. It didn't matter if I died trying. I was going to try and get my children out of that situation and myself out of that situation and provide the life that they deserve to have. And so we left. I was able to I took pictures the night that the abuse occurred. It occurred earlier in the day, and he was working nights, and so he left, and I was able to get pictures of the abuse. And that next day, we were able to leave, and I filed charges against him for abusing my children. And I also was soon after able to file for divorce. But abusers don't typically just say, okay, have a nice life, as you walk out the door. They are typically following you and stalking you and harassing you and threatening you. It doesn't stop just because you finally leave successfully. And so that's definitely what we experienced a lot of after that. So it didn't stop right then, but that was the beginning of my healing journey and my journey to freedom. And not long after our divorce was final, he ended up marrying someone else. And while he was still harassing us and sending me letters and things like that, he had moved on with this other relationship too, but they oftentimes can keep those things going at the same time. And he did brutally murder her. And the prosecutor's office said it was the most gruesome case that they had ever seen. And he beat her to death and waited and cleaned up her body and took her to the hospital, stating that she had fallen. And so at that time, I grieved for a woman that I never knew, because she lived my very worst nightmare. And they had had a child that was just a few months old. And so she literally lived all of the fears that I had had throughout those years. And I found out that he had done that when his mother had she drove a letter to me from another state and brought it and hand delivered it to me. And it was stating that he was coming back for us. He was going to come back to get his family. So of course I was scared. And I noticed that it had a detention center stamp on the envelope, and I didn't think that even though he worked in law enforcement and different things like that, I'm pretty sure that they don't stamp the envelopes of employees. So I had reached out to that detention center and told them who I was and that I was, really in fear of my life and for my children. And they immediately put me through to the prosecutor's office, who wanted to know all of the details of the types of abuse that I experienced by him. And when I explained the different things that I experienced, they just stated that they couldn't tell me a lot because they needed to use me as a similar transaction witness in the murder case. And because the things that I had described experiencing were the things that he did to her and ended up taking it further to kill her. I did receive a death threat when they listed me as a similar transaction witness in the case, and therefore they had determined that they wanted to try to get the conviction without me, but if needed, that they would utilize my testimony if they needed to do so to get a conviction. But they were able to have him convicted. I lived many, many, many years terrified of when he would be released from jail, and was really tormented by what that was going to be like when it occurred. But he was released last year. And I can tell you that I'm grateful because I found so much passion in the purpose of what I am doing now, that it gives me a peace as I stand, even in the midst of all of this, to try to help others. I have peace and I feel more strength and I do feel empowered. So I'm not walking in the terror that I thought that I would walk in. Of course, there's concerns and we're careful and do things that we need to do, but I'm not walking in that terror. And I'm so thankful for the peace that I have in the midst of these situations. But my hope is that, oftentimes when people would hear parts of my story throughout my life, they'd be like, you have to write a book. You have to write a book. It's crazy how much you've had to live through. And I had thought about it, but I never really thought that I was going to pursue that because I didn't understand at the time, because I was still healing through so much. I didn't understand at the time how helpful it is when somebody's going through something difficult to hear someone else's story about something maybe similar that they've gone through and have been able to heal from it, and they're thriving. Oftentimes you can feel hopeless in those types of situations. So if it brings any type of encouragement to someone else, I knew it was worth that. And so spent some time writing the book just to try to provide enough information about my story to make it something that's useful for others. I didn't make it a long and drawn out book that tells every detail because people will get lost in that. The motive was not to share every detail about every gruesome thing. It was to provide hope. And so hopefully that is what the book is going to do.
Absolutely. But also, man, so starting from the very beginning, I of course want to thank you for even sharing, but yes, it is an incredible story. And I mean, I'm glad that, now it is a book. You're absolutely able to help people. I mean, literally just by sharing it, I'm just like, there's so much that I absolutely want to touch on. But of course, I have to start there. Definitely just want to thank you for even, sharing with us at all. But also being willing to share with the world, with that great, incredible book that you've now written also. But wow, there was a lot that I was, moved by, of course. And I'm so glad you said, when you took that pause and said, but I am still here. I'm on the other side. It is easy to get lost in all that and almost be like, oh my gosh, what did happen to that woman? And all of those things. So I'm so, thankful that you are here now, that you are able to help others. You have so much to contribute. But I was even taken aback just from the very beginning, 5. to be honest, knowing that your story goes all the way back to when you were 5 years old. I mean, I have a 5-year-old. So, and yes, I am a fellow mama bear. So yep, I was feeling all of these feelings as you were talking, but also a fellow survivor. So yes, of course, we don't get into this work accidentally. There's usually something that draws us in, and I am definitely no different than that. I also call my children lifesavers. So I was also very moved by that. Absolutely. But it's just incredible to think that at 5, when they're supposed to just be, going to kindergarten, like starting school, just figuring out life, that you would be tormented in that kind of way. And by someone, like you said, then wanted nothing more than to see unhappiness. I mean, it's just, we know these people exist, my goodness, but it's just to be in their presence, to not be able to escape that. And just, you were just being a kid. Like there was nothing you could have possibly done to bring that on. And honestly, it doesn't even matter. I also feel like, I don't always hear this, but I definitely think that people have a hard time understanding how like these things can happen to kids. And, they don't even like talking about it because it gets real weird when we're talking about kids. It may be easier to like make justifications like, well, what was the kid doing? Were they kind of like one of those kids that like were really curious? Is that why? Like, were they seeing too much? No, it doesn't matter because the behavior doesn't matter. There's just never an excuse. A child is a child. And a child should be able to just roam this earth freely, explore it freely, and never, ever be the target of that. So it's just incredible to me that there are individuals on this earth that see children and see targets. I mean, of all things.
Yeah. And it was extra, interesting is the wrong word, but just how he began doing that was my grandmother on my mom's side had passed away. And I was very, very close to her. And so what he pretended he was doing was comforting me. And that's when the sexual abuse began. And it went so far with the sexual abuse that he began taking recordings and taking pictures and making me, like, he came to me a couple of times and said whoever he was giving the pictures to liked them and wanted more. So we had to do more pictures. So, there was that level of exploitation even through the child sexual abuse material that was occurring. So it went even deeper. Not that it wasn't deep enough at just the sexual abuse at 5. And I couldn't get away from him or from it. We lived out in the country, so he would try to take every possible opportunity when somebody wasn't around to do something to me, and even to the point where as a little kid, if I would try to sit and watch cartoons for a little bit, we had like a satellite dish. And I don't know how, because I'm not experienced with the satellite dishes, but somehow he figured out that while I was watching TV, he could go out and do something to the satellite dish and pornography would come up on the screen. So I couldn't even get away from it, trying to escape it through watching cartoons. And, I started being bullied at school, probably because I'm sure I had to be a little different than some of the other carefree kids. I was carrying the weight of the world. And having to keep all those secrets. And like, I had started cutting just to try to, I know that that's not uncommon either for children who experience sexual abuse, because, for me, I didn't know it was a thing. I just knew that when I was doing it, the physical pain, because I would focus on that physical pain, would help relieve some of the emotional pain. And so there was so much that I was carrying and dealing with at that time. And for someone to continue that, to start it at all, but then to continue to get worse in those things for that amount of time is just mind blowing to me.
Oh, no, exactly. And that's why I just think, oh, it's incredible. And that you would want to taint someone's, upbringing in that way and make it just about that and just for your personal gain. I mean, because it definitely wasn't for, any other reason, when they're doing the exploitation, they just see what they can get, to be honest. And so they're not even, thinking about all the damage that can cause, like the, route that's going to take, but just that there is someone vulnerable here. There's someone that I can control here. Absolutely. Because a kid does not fight back, and a kid is going to be confused by everything. And a kid doesn't even know how to articulate these things. And so it's just, It's unfathomable that these things even happen, but it's just, yeah, I can never, especially having children now, I'm just like, oh my gosh, no.
Right.
So yep, I'm definitely with you there. But then I think you said something incredible also following that is that, and then you think that when you escape things as a child, when you experience trauma, that, as an adult, like it might get easier, like there's that wonderful myth there. But no, 9 times out of 10, it absolutely repeats itself. But the thing is too, we got to talk about why. I mean, if all you've ever been taught is trauma and abuse, and that you're a victim, and that you're overpowered by someone, and that you don't have value, and if you say anything, I'm going to hurt you, I'm going to hurt someone you love, like you hear all these things, you're living with it. And the thing is, it was your reality. I mean, it wasn't like he did it sometimes and then he was nice to you sometimes. It was really like all the time, this was your reality. You knew that that's what it was. And honestly, to make it even easier, like sometimes a lot of kids actually do give in to what's happening because they just want to stop it. They just want it to be over with. They don't want to have to make it any worse than what it already is. So they definitely, those things happen. But then as a result, you learn that this is your life. And so unfortunately, heck yeah, it's going to be hard to then go out into the world and find a healthy partner to be with, please. Like that's like an impossible task. Like, okay, well now go ahead and be healthy. And we hope you find a very wonderful relationship and that it goes well and is successful. How on earth, like what tools do you have? What insight are you going off of? And what, who do you even have to like help you like figure that out and decipher that? And like, what discernment do you even have? So of course it wasn't surprising to me, but of course I want to remind everyone else that, yeah, that is absolutely how trauma works. So no, it was not surprising to hear that you ended up in an abusive relationship. I myself found myself in something similar when I was growing up also. And similarly, it was when I was young. So like, I think it's interesting, like we're still impressionable. At 17, you were absolutely still impressionable. Yeah. You were absolutely still learning. And instead of just learning, you're now in an abusive situation, but also having to be a mom, like two things that like take a lot of you, and like from you, but like, and of course, motherhood in the best way though. That one takes from you in the best way. I mean, it's a testimony. It is everything. But having to do that, I mean, but it is a struggle. It's not easy being a mom. It's not like, oh yeah, there's this manual, you just go read it, right? Let alone navigating that with someone of that caliber and like that can do those kind of things. So yeah, I definitely think it's an incredible, that you were able to do that. And I definitely love hearing though that, there was this chance where you were able to eventually escape, but only for him to then do the abuse to someone else. I mean, that was the also incredible part. And in there still have ties to you. And I think what was interesting was that I kept hearing very loudly when you said that he kept pushing the marriage agenda is the control factor. It was like, oh, hearing that from me only as a fellow survivor, I was like, well, yep, control. Because of course he kept pushing the marriage agenda, not because he loved you. I don't even think abusers are really capable of love. They're very capable of faking it and telling you, things that sound like love or sound charming, but he absolutely just wanted that control factor. So it also wasn't surprising for me to hear after that the abuse actually intensified, because now they're like, okay, great, now I do have you under my grasp. I do know that you listen, and I'm just going to do more now. Cool. Thanks for giving me that green light. It's just ridiculous, that we have that, but yes, I am super, that's why I'm so happy to hear that, yep, we're talking today and you are not tied to this person anymore, thank God, because it's just, my goodness, and it is unfortunate that we also live in a society where he could be released. I'm not gonna lie, would have loved to live in a society where there wasn't a release date for this person. I mean, for that to even be thought of, but I am glad to hear that, yes, you were able to get your peace, that you have, which you deserve, you absolutely deserve more than anyone. And just, to be able to have that. But I am curious with all of that, now that we've, I even continue processing myself, but just, how did you get, so like, I know that he was convicted. I definitely heard that part, but what also helped you on the healing journey, which, like you said, we're still on, you're still on, I'm still on, but like, what has helped you on that space? Like, other than the conviction, were there other things, were there other people, what helped you?
Well, I do think healing is really a lifelong journey. I feel like it is. I mean, I know that you get to certain points where things are a lot easier and a lot better, but I think that it's good to be open to continue healing because little things will come up at different times. One of the big things for me was upon his release, not long before he was released, he had looked me up on LinkedIn, so he knew where I worked, and he sent a letter to our house, so he knows where I live. And so just that, it was all very re-triggering. And that was difficult for me, just because I had to make a determination, because I'm a very intentional person. I've had to be very intentional throughout my lifetime to, survive and to heal and to learn new tools and make sure that I wanted to be the mom that my kids deserved and
Absolutely.
provide the life that my kids deserve. So I've been very intentional. So at that point, I had to determine, am I going to live in terror, or am I going to pursue, because fear is a real thing. I'm not taking away from that. Like, there's different times where fear will pop up. Sometimes it's warranted. Sometimes, our minds can try to take over different things, but so I'm not discounting fear at all, but I didn't want to live the remainder of my life focused on this fear when there's so much that I wanted to do that was going to be positive.
Mhm.
And so I had to make that determination. And, in the past couple years, I've also been diagnosed with lupus. And oftentimes our body carries that trauma and it can affect us physically, even as we're healing. So it's not that I did anything wrong or didn't do enough of something or whatever that caused me to be in the situation to where I now have lupus, but it's just interesting how our bodies can store different things when it comes to the trauma. And I had to then rethink about that as well, with the past couple of years with the lupus, am I going to live in fear, or am I going to go ahead and walk out the purpose that I feel God has placed on my life?
Mhm.
And so I was intentional and made a choice. Again, fear will pop up at different times, but there are so many different tools that you can use when you are experiencing fear. A lot of things is, what do you know to be true? Like, what is true right now? Don't think about all the what ifs and the possibilities, but what is true right now? And just being able to walk through different, using different tools to get yourself back into a situation to where you feel like you can function again. But I've always had somebody, sometimes more than one somebody, but kind of like your tribe. And they've been different throughout my lifetime. But I'm so thankful for having people in my life, even if it was for short periods, or maybe it's been, a longer friendship or whatever, that believed me. I think that one of the most important things in the beginning of the healing journey is that you have somebody to talk to who believes you. They may not understand everything that you've gone through, but that you can be heard and believed, because there's something validating, because abusers usually try to make it your fault, that they've done what they've done. And so having at least somebody at different periods in my life who was able to stand there and be like, I'm so sorry that happened to you, and that was not your fault, type of thing, and have that support is great. I think counseling is also a wonderful tool. I'm all about tools in a tool belt. I am always adding to tools in my tool belt, whether it's for, this emotional stuff, or if it's for the physical stuff with lupus. But I think that counseling can be very useful as well. All counselors are not equal. So I think it's important to, it's almost like an interviewing of counselors. If you feel like somebody is not a good fit, find somebody else, because there's somebody out there that's going to be good for you. But they can listen and provide tools that, as we've gone through these experiences, we wouldn't have known the tools that are available to us to be able to utilize. So I think that that's great as well. My faith is probably the biggest part of my healing journey. It's interesting because, when I talk about my childhood and all that I endured with that. One of the things that stands out to me when I think back about that time is how I had all these horrendous things happening, but then I was also part of a church and they had a children's ministry. And if anybody out there is a children's minister, thank you so much for what you do, because you do not realize the impact that you make in these kids' lives. But they really taught me about love and God's love and how he created me and what I was created to be, and like all these types of things, how to have a relationship with God. And so even in the midst of all of the abuse and the awful things that I was going through, I also had learned that when I sit and pray, if I'm by myself, like if I sit and pray, or, I remember I could barely read, but I would have my Bible out and be reading different scriptures, but I could just feel the peace and God's presence in my life. And I know that as I've carried that throughout my life, that is where my peace comes from, even in the midst of the things that I've experienced. So that has been a huge part of my healing journey as well.
Ooh, absolutely. And what's wonderful about that is that you mentioned so many great techniques and tactics and different things we can use, but all that were unique to you, and like we always want to lift up whatever works for you, because like if
Right.
for someone else, like that might not be the one thing that works for you, or if the counseling thing isn't it and it's something else, mindfulness, whatever it is, just find it. It's definitely just a worthy part of it. You should definitely do it, and it can lead to so many other great things, because clearly you're also doing some amazing things now. And I also wanted to ask, because you mentioned this at the beginning, so you had the incredible fate of not only finding somebody to spend your life with, but you were able to combine. So you got the 3 kids that you brought. They brought 3 kids, and then you got your other kids. I know you said some other kids that you're loving up on and all this stuff. I mean, we have to know. So like, how did you find this wonderful person and like blend? Like, wow, it just that's also an incredible part of like your story for sure.
It is. We met at work. We didn't work at the same place, but
Mhm.
our places of employment shared like the same cafeteria and same different facilities. So we met at work. And so our story is not one that's free of issues. It wasn't the live happily ever after and no issues, because he had also experienced a lot of things himself, growing up and through his adulthood. And although after I had my last son, my 3rd son, which was a different relationship than my first marriage, I took some time, no relationship, just for me to try, well, and my kids, but like just to try to heal. I was like, something's happening. Like I seem to be attracting the wrong like relationships. And so I took that time. It was about 2.5 years just to try to focus on that and, again, be intentional about what I was doing. And in hindsight, I probably could have taken more time. And he hadn't gone through a lot of healing yet either. And so we've had a lot of bumps, but we've had a lot of growth, and we have been very supportive of one another as we are healing. And when things have occurred that have been hard on our relationship, like reevaluating. I don't think that that's bad. Reevaluating and making sure that you're doing things in a healthy manner, or getting back on a healthy track, or whatever the situation may be that you're in. And so it's been a challenge, and it's also been a blessing. He's given me a wonderful place to just learn to be me, and to like accept myself and accept what I need to do as far as where I want to go, and that whole the growing pains that occur with all of that. He's been a safe place for that, and so I'm forever grateful that we have endured and triumphed over a lot of things that were difficult for us. And anytime you're also blending kids, like blending a family with kids is also a challenge, especially when there's so many kids and there's so many variations of ages and, and all of that. And so I'm really thankful for what we've built so far, and where we're headed.
Oh my gosh, absolutely. And there's hope, everyone. So you heard it here. So like you can definitely, and I mean, and I definitely hear what you're saying. I appreciate that the insight of like, in hindsight, you could have probably also taken more time. But I think too, you find the person, you're meant to find at the time that you're meant to find them. So like the fact that you've been able to build this beautiful thing with this person, I mean, just goes to show like that you all found each other at a, good time when you were, ready to do that, but also like at least ready to also make that commitment, knowing that it would take work. I mean, that you were never going to find each other at a perfect time because that perfect time does not exist. Right. There is no such thing. And so like, that's not there. Unfortunately, we do try to strive for it. So I know we do as humans, but that is why we fail, because unfortunately we're imperfect already. So right. I do love to hear that, you all, appreciate that about one another, but appreciate that you want to grow together, you know what I mean? And do all these great things. So, it definitely is wonderful that, you were able to do that and, blend that together and do that. And so if you had advice for anybody, wherever they're at, if they're like still trying to find somebody, if they are in a marriage, if they're thinking about marriage, wherever they're at, what advice would you give them?
One of the biggest things that I think is important is, you don't have to search for red flags. They're usually, if there's a red flag, it's there. But oftentimes, many of us will try to make, I'll use the word excuses because I can't think of another word, but excuses for the red flag that you're seeing. So, oh, maybe they're having a bad day, or, oh, well, they went through all this stuff, so they're doing this. And, I understand why. And it's not that we shouldn't be understanding, but I think that we need to be very aware of red flags and determine if nothing changed, would you still want that relationship 20 years from now? Because you don't want to walk into a relationship thinking, okay, I see this, 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 and this, but these are all the reasons why, and oh, it will get better. Whether they're telling you it will get better or you're just imagining that it will get better. It's not that there's probably not going to be some growth, but I think that it's important that you look at the situation for what it is rather than what you want it to be, and make sure that it's in line with where you want to go in life. Because so many people, I don't think really look long-term. They love the feeling of being in love and that initial stuff that occurs. And it's like looking long-term when you've gone through such trauma sometimes can be difficult, but it's so necessary, because if they don't fit where you want to be, then it's okay that doesn't work.
Absolutely.
You don't have to try to make it work. It's okay that it doesn't work, and give space for an opportunity for one that will work with what you want in the future.
Oh, yes. Can't agree more. And so, and with that, and with all that wonderful advice, I'm also curious, what other things lie in the future other than, because now you've already had this wonderful thing that you're building, and, and you're doing all these great ways that you're growing. But I'm also curious, are there any other books in you? Are you doing anything else with Yet Still I Stand? Yet Still I Stand. I want to make sure I didn't say it wrong. But so, what is in store for you in the future?
I do think that I will be writing some more. So I have a heart for writing for kids as well, to help if they are going through any of these types of situations, where it's on their level and they can understand that they're not alone and that people care, and, all of the above. So I have some books that I want to write pertaining to that. And then with Yet Still I Stand, I foresee continuing with the speaking engagements and the coaching and just the different workshops and training and stuff that I do, only having that grow, because that really just started in February. I opened the business, made it official in October of last year. So it's been almost a year. But I honestly didn't intend on doing anything with it anytime soon. But in February, everything started kind of exploding in a good way. And I've had multiple opportunities that completely blew my mind this year. And so I imagine that continuing. And then I'd also like to start a nonprofit part of Yet Still I Stand. And one of the first things that I'm really interested in doing will pertain to those who are aging out of the foster system. And so I don't know all the details of what that's going to look like yet, but that is somewhere that my heart is really at, just because they're so vulnerable for so many different like exploitation and abuse and things like that. And I really just want to create a safe place and resources for, and a kind of a big family for those who are experiencing that.
Wow. Okay. That is, yeah, admirable work. And I definitely think, and it's definitely so needed. Absolutely. Like it's definitely another population that absolutely needs that assistance. And that actually just made me think of too, and even with Yet Still I Stand. So I'm glad that it just took off. It's actually a new, venture and all of that. Did you always know that that was in you, that you wanted to start a business like that? Or yeah, like what
No.
led to that?
No, really what started the thought is just that I knew that I was working on the book, and I was like, I wanted to get a website set up under the Yet Still I Stand before, you have to worry about the domain names and all that stuff being taken. And
Yep.
then I thought, well, let me go ahead and do an LLC just in case I decide I want to do some training or something like that. In the future, I'll have that name locked in. So no, I did not. And, I mentioned as a kid that I didn't want to even answer questions in class or anything like that. So speaking engagements were not something that I was looking forward to in
Right.
my future. But it's been an amazing experience, and, there's been a lot of growth that's occurred. And so I'm looking forward to all that's ahead.
Oh my gosh, yes. And actually, I do remember that. Not only do I remember that, but it was specifically sharpening your pencil.
Yeah.
So like, because all the eyes that were on you and all of that. So now you are now this business owner, public speaker, the girl that didn't even want to sharpen her pencil in front of her classmates. Like,
Right.
and it's just so great to see that it's clearly a wonderful, illustration of how you are still standing. It's definitely such a beautiful, capturing and, of that, and just how you were not, completely broken. I mean, you were definitely, I'm sure it broke, definitely, but it did not damage you. And so you're still here. You're absolutely still contributing in that great way. And I love that you're now, doing that for others and seeing other ways to do that. So definitely can't applaud that enough, but it's just incredible to hear that. Yep, you went from that all the way from that part and, to still be here and doing that. So that's definitely amazing.
Thank you.
Absolutely. And so with that, if anybody wanted to contact you, work with you, get the book, all of these wonderful things, how can they do that?
The book is on Amazon, and I have that in paperback, and you could order the ebook if you prefer to use your electronic devices to read it. So that's on Amazon under Yet Still I Stand. And my website also has all of that information and has ways to contact me. And that is yetstillistand.com.
Oh, okay. Y'all heard it. So there's a lot of easy ways to find it. It's all like with the name and it's easy to get. So y'all should definitely tap in, connect, but also absolutely get the book, because that is definitely something, helpful. It has this incredible story in it, but, also has these great tips for you. So is there anything else you would like to share with our viewers today?
I don't think so. I thank you for allowing me this opportunity.
Absolutely. And thank you. We definitely thank you. And thank you, viewers, always for tuning in. Definitely encourage you, especially if anything resonated with you today, anything you heard, that you take it, absolutely connect and absolutely make use of it. So thank you.
Thank you.